Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Over the past decade, you've heard me talking about emotional intelligence. And a couple of years ago, a mentor said to me, he said, Daniel, you're probably about 3 or 4 years ahead of the market in terms of what you're talking about with emotional intelligence. Now, last night, it was about 12 o'clock at night. I was still awake. 1 o'clock in the morning, I was still awake. And the reason why I was awake, because I was watching the Joe Rogan podcast experience. And on there, he was interviewing Mike Tyson. And some things really started to stand out to me on this podcast. The first thing, Mike Tyson started to talk about his trainer, Cuss. This is a trainer going back 20 or 30 years ago who was teaching him visualizations. And visualizations is a major part of coaching. It's a major part of training. It's a major part of becoming a high performer. So I'm going to show you something in a moment. The second thing Mike Tyson was talking about was emotional intelligence and the difference that it was going to make in high performance. The third thing Mike Tyson spoke about was discipline. So I want to show you a couple of little clips today that I've taken away from the Joe Rogan experience, and it all relates to high performance. And what we do on the Accelerate and Multiply live stream is bring you new ideas on how you can accelerate and multiply your performance. What you got to remember, you have to remember that your DNA, if you took all of your DNA and you stretched it out from where you are today all the way over to the sun and back to where you are, you could stretch that from where you are to the sun and back 300 times. And we are absolutely unlimited. And we have to constantly find new ways to be able to accelerate and multiply our performance. And in my opinion, is if you just do what successful people do, you will get the same results. So you've got a very successful person here. The undisputed world boxing champion is a household name. Recently, this is how well he's known. When they announced his comeback fight, 2.5 billion responses to the announcement. So this guy is very well known. He's talking about visualization. So if you want to accelerate and multiply your performance, visualization is going to be key. Now, just out of curiosity, if you're watching this live or on the replay, if you've used visualizations in the past, personally or professionally, I want you to type in the feed below visualization. The second thing he's going to talk about is discipline. And I love the way that Mike Tyson expresses what discipline is. And it's something that he'd learned from his coach. So we're going to talk about visualization. We're going to view a clip here on discipline. And then thirdly, we're going to hear what Mike Tyson says about emotional intelligence. So Shianti, thanks for joining me here live. And let's head over and let's have a listen to this conversation from these two legends. So here we go. Let's have a look at what they've got to say.
No one was better at the psychological.
Oh, I would never been the champ if I wasn't from Cuss, because he put stuff in my mind. I started thinking about myself being these people, visualizing myself being, I don't know, great or somebody. I've never done that in my life. I've never heard, not even in the ghetto, somebody say this. Like, that's why he's great. Like, I'm talking about, like, home. That's why he's incredible. So why is he incredible? I don't think he's that incredible. Why shouldn't you have that? Why should he have that and not you? I've never heard somebody say that to me.
So what we hear here is that we hear about Mike Tyson talking about visualization. And it was one of the things that made him great. It was one of the things that made him different and more competitive to everybody else. So one of the things that I work with my clients on is visualization. And visualization is about using your imagination to actively visualize the person that you most want to become. See, the power of the visualization is an internal representation in your mind. Your visualization is coupled with an emotional state. So the pictures you hold combined with the emotion that you have at any given moment determines your behaviors. It determines the difference of what you do and what you don't do. And here you're hearing this from the world's #1 boxer, the best boxer who's ever lived. He has used visualization. And this is one of the things that made him more successful. This is one of the things that accelerated and multiplied his performance. So that's just one thing he mentioned. So that's the first thing. Mike Tyson's talking about visualization. The second thing he's talking about here is he's talking about discipline. And I love the way that he describes discipline, and tune in and hear what he says and how he describes discipline.
What prevents from doing the right thing from the wrong thing with the same feeling? You know what prevents that?
What?
Emotional intelligence.
Yes.
The majority of the world don't even possess the world. The world is not even 50 years old.
Right.
So this is going to be a struggle for the next 100 years. That's going until we get that.
Yes.
That's going to have to be our main objective, to develop that in order to succeed as human beings.
Yeah, that's no truer words have ever been said. That's what it is. It's emotional intelligence.
Because listen, our feelings are enslaved by our emotions, and our emotions are enslaved by our feelings.
And sometimes we sort of placate those emotions by drowning it in food or in booze or in gambling or sex or anything that can distract you.
And then we turn that into memories.
Yeah.
And then we become enslaved to our memories.
Yeah.
And it never stops.
Right. That's who we are. We are an alcoholic. We
allowed ourselves to become that.
Yes.
We can stop from coming that, just like we learned Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
So we can learn from that. So that's why they learn from that. So now it's not hopeless anymore.
Right. That's why it's so hard for people, because they have a memory of all the things they've done that's wrong, and they do it all the time, and that becomes who they think they are.
So
this is incredible. We got a boxer and a commentator of sports talking about emotional intelligence. And what Mike Tyson's saying here is that the word emotional intelligence is only 50 years old. And he's saying, and he's predicting in the future, that this is going to be the most key skill over the next 100 years. As he talks about it, Joe Rogan weighs in on the conversation, and he's talking about how we shut down our emotions. We shut down our emotions with food. And so what happens is when people are feeling anger, sadness, fear, guilt, what they do is they shut down those emotions by eating food. They do it by consuming alcohol. And these are all things that shut down the emotions. But these two gentlemen, think about this. Joe Rogan has about 9 million followers, and he's talking about emotional intelligence. Mike Tyson just announced that he was doing a comeback fight, and 2.5 billion people responded. So one of the key things that's going to separate the high performers from the low performers is emotional intelligence. So they've spoken about there. So that's emotional intelligence. Going back to the discipline one, let's hear what Mike Tyson says about discipline. And I love the way he describes it, so articulate, especially from an athlete, how he talks about discipline.
The weave and the constant pressure.
Exactly. But I believe style is relevant. I believe it's the morale behind the style.
Mm-hmm.
I think success in fighting in life is about desire and the will.
Yeah.
How bad do you want it? Is it worth dying for? That's the true greatness, is the willingness to die. So is this thing worth greatness?
The mindset that he instilled in you and the way he gave you the tools in order to think about things in a way that fueled that mindset.
Yeah, but that doesn't do good in the real world, though. It's really disastrous in the real world.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that is true, right?
That too, yeah.
Isn't that crazy? It's like the very thing that made you special could fuck you in the real world.
The real world. Guys like that go to prison. They don't exist in the real world. They gotta take them out of there.
It's crazy.
You know, they have to remove them from the real world. Those kind of people like myself.
Isn't that what's crazy? Like, that's where the crazy adjustment has to come in, where you have to learn how to be. And that's where cannabis helped you a lot too.
Yeah, right? Oh man, forget it.
So another key takeaway there from Mike Tyson, he's talking about, that desire. He's talking about what is it that you want and are you willing to die for it? And what I know is the difference between the high performers and the low performers is that the low performers not willing to die for their goal or their outcome. They're not willing to crawl over broken glass. They're not willing to bleed for what they want. And Mike Tyson, what he's talking about here is he's talking about desire. He's talking about you having to be willing to die for what you're doing. In this interview, he's talking about working out, and he's talking about working out and feeling that his heart wants to explode. And he's saying that this is the difference between winning and losing. So these are some wonderful ideas that you can take away today so you can start to accelerate and multiply your own results. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are today, have a wonderful day.